Okay, the next question, like I said, is directed to Bill Northey again. Hope you're not getting sick of going first, but okay. We lost tons of topsoil during the floods of Cedar Rapids a few years ago. Yet your solution to flooding is more and bigger tile lines and more cornfields. Please explain how more drainage creates better flood control.
Interesting question. Our solution is not tile lines and cornfields. It's conservation practices and conservation tillage, and it's what producers are doing, and they're doing a great job of it out there, and we have more to do. Certainly, it is very tough when you have saturated soils that are in the spring get 6, 7, 8, 10 inches of water. In some cases, they got almost half a year's worth of water in a couple months there in 2008. It is really tough in any kind of farming situation to be able to hold that soil on the land. When you get out there, and we visited lots of farms, we talked to lots of producers, and you get out there and you see where folks are using no-till, where they have terraces and grass waterways. Those folks lost very little soil. And in some cases almost none at all, because they were doing the practices even in a rotation, even in an annual crop. I think producers are doing a great job. I do think tile lines and drainage of farmland is something that can be done. In fact, I think last spring was actually very beneficial, as we had lots and lots of snow in this area as well. Those tile lines through the winter were taking the moisture out of that soil, and when that meltdown came in the spring, some of that water went into the soil rather than surface runoff, and we had much less flooding this last spring than we would have if we didn't have those tile lines out there.
I think that what the question is getting to too is that what other practices can we have? Certainly, mechanically engineered practices can help, whether it's no-till or terraces. But there is a growing role, I think, that we need to have for perennial crops in the landscape. Research at Iowa State University shows that perennial crops will absorb much more rainfall than annual crops. During the first hour of a heavy rainfall, perennial crops like prairie grasses will absorb 5 to 7 times more rainfall than will corn and soybeans. And so I think we need to look at the role we can have for more perennial crops on the landscape.
I think there are certainly new technologies that folks are looking at. There's a lot of effort in cover crops as well, covering that ground in the fall, actually flying on in some cases the cover crops in early September. So when those soybeans come off, that corn comes off, we have a growing crop there that's growing again in the spring. And I think there are new technologies, and we got a lot of folks that are working on those technologies. And at a chance, we have this ever-changing, ever-improving production system out there.
Well, these are all good things, but we have to look at the ultimate sustainability of our agricultural system. We in Iowa have received, and we actually were gifted with tremendous soils from the prairies. Since we started farming in Iowa, we've lost about half of our topsoil to erosion and lost about half of our carbon to oxidation. And so this is, of course, not a sustainable kind of system. So we need to look at how we can transition to putting more cover crops in the landscape, more perennial crops in the landscape. We're going to need to do that before we deplete our ecological capital too much here in Iowa.
Okay, we're getting close to our hour, but we have one more question from the audience, and then is the panel okay if we go ahead and go into closing statements after that, or is there something else you just gotta ask? Because if there is, we can, we can push a little bit. All right. So this question asks, 10% budget on food. What is the real cost with farm subsidies?
And that would be for me, I assume, because I mentioned.
Well, you did answer the last two, so I'll give this the. Yes, if somebody says 10% budget on food.
Cost of the income that an average American pays for the cost of food.
Okay, Bill understands the question. Maybe I should let Bill go first then. I guess I didn't really understand the question, but Bill's got it covered, so go ahead.
So I think, as I understand the question, is Americans spend about 10% of their income on food, and the question, or the concern of the questioner is how much of that, when you consider subsidies and you add that into the true cost, how much is that end up to be? Well, I think it's a very small increase. In fact, if you look at the amount of dollars that are spent in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and certainly there's very little dollars spent in state departments to creating subsidies, it's about $20 billion. That's a lot of money. The total cost of food in this country is over $1 trillion. That's 0.2%. So the cost of subsidies add a tiny portion. Others would argue there's other costs out there that could be factored into those pieces. I still think agriculture and food in the United States is a huge part. And it is safest food, it's fighting with challenges, and in fact, because we can find some of these issues out there, it shows us that we demand the safest food supply in the world and the best cost food supply in the world as well.
Well, about 20 or about 1960, our average food dollar spent was about 18% of our income. Then, our average money spent on healthcare was about 9%. Now it's flipped. Now we spend about 9%, actually 9.5% on food, and about 18% on healthcare. That it shows that we have some problems here. And some would argue that part of the problem is that we're not eating a really healthy diet. Obesity in this country is a tremendous cost, like about $150 billion a year. So that's a tremendous thing that adds to the healthcare cost. So it's a little bit off the topic, but yet it is on the topic because we can be healthier if we eat healthier food. Yes, maybe I'll stop on that point.
Certainly, there's healthcare issues are a huge issue, and obviously it's an important political issue as well. But I am not one that says that it's farmers' fault for the healthcare issues or blame the current agricultural system for that. I think certainly producers, all of us as consumers, make decisions in the foods that we choose, and mostly farmers respond to the markets out there, and those markets are the signals that cause them to grow what they grow. So I certainly am not one that blames agriculture for the healthcare crisis.
Certainly we all have to make good choices, but it helps if we have more choices. And locally produced food is one thing that we can do to have fresher food and maybe even safer food and healthier food. But the other parts of the cost of food, besides subsidies, and I agree with Bill that subsidies are really not a big part of it, but there are a lot of off-site environmental effects that are related to our food costs. Even like in the Gulf of Mexico, the dead zone that gets to be the size of the state of New Jersey every summer. Well, research from the U.S. Geological Survey shows that leaching of nitrate through tidal drainage from the upper Midwest into the rivers and getting to the Gulf is one of the major causes of that. So these are some of the off-site costs of food that can accrue as well.
Okay, and since we have about 5 minutes, so I think we'll go with 2 minutes closing statements for each, if that's all right with both people.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you all for being here. It's a beautiful day at the fair. You'll get a chance this afternoon, but thank you for spending an hour, or almost an hour, a little over an hour, with all of us here, and certainly your caring about agriculture and the future of agriculture. It's certainly been my pleasure to be your Secretary of Agriculture. There's so many challenges, so many issues that we need to face, and I think certainly some of those issues that happen in the next 4 years are ones that we can't come up with now to think about what those problems are going to be. And you need a secretary, I certainly would intend to be that kind of secretary that you can trust to make those kinds of decisions on whatever those issues are. Let me just also mention one of the things we talk about. We certainly talk about the ability of agriculture to sustain itself. One of the great things we get to do is Century Farm Awards and Heritage Farm Awards, and we gave out 360 Heritage or Century Farm Awards this last year, 100 years in the same family. We gave out 66 Heritage Farm Awards this last year. That's 150 years in the same family. Talk about sustainability. Talk about making the decisions to keep those farms in that farm. Certainly those farms have to be profitable. They have to change with the times. And the pride that those families have in those farms is really amazing. So if you're ever at the state fair and can see on that Tuesday those Century Farm Awards, you will sense the pride that people have in agriculture in this state, the optimism that they have about the future of agriculture. And even Iowa State University just has a record number of students that entered the agricultural college this year. I think agriculture is very, very bright in this state. We have to certainly work, and I would ask for your support to be your next Secretary of the meeting. Thank you.
Iowa agriculture has a strong, proud tradition of being a leader in agriculture nationwide. We're blessed with some of the best soils in the world. We have some good weather for growing crops. We have some hardworking people here in Iowa, a very strong tradition here. But now things are changing. We have some change in the air. And if we don't adapt to these changes, then we're going to not be that shining jewel in agriculture in the future. Some of these changes are, if you look at agriculture anywhere in Iowa, it's highly dependent upon cheap fossil fuels, cheap oil. Without cheap oil, we could not farm the way we do. And we are at the end of the cheap oil era. We need to make preparations for how we're going to power agriculture in the future. Producing ethanol for cars is not going to cut it for us. We need to make fuel on the farm, energy on the farm. We need mid-sized wind turbines on farms all across Iowa to power agriculture. We need to have biofuel production at the local level that puts the profit in the pockets of the farmer and uses perennial crops that conserve the soil. So we have a lot of possibilities. We need to also protect our water quality. And so these are things that we can do. Change is coming. It's not a matter of whether it's going to happen or not. Change is going to come, but are we going to be prepared? Are we going to wait till it's too late and then have chaos and maybe food shortages and fuel shortages? Or are we going to take action now to prepare for the future so we can power agriculture in the future and make a smooth transition? So either we wait till default comes and pushes us beyond our capability, or we plan now and create our future for a prosperous Iowa agriculture down the road.